Welcome to Morristown, New Jersey, where Washington and his men endured freezing cold temperatures like right now, mutinies, and starvations during 4 winters of the American Revolution. After the victories over the British in Trenton and Princeton, Washington and his men marched north to Morristown, New Jersey, where they stayed for the winter of 1776 to 1777. Washington and his men stayed here for about 6 months, and Washington maintained his headquarters over at Jacob Arnold's Tavern, where he was able to overlook the men drilling on the green, which is where we are today. In February of 1777, there was a smallpox outbreak that not only impacted the people of Morristown, but also Washington and his men. Washington ordered the inoculation of his military men and also set up hospitals in the nearby churches over here and over here. Despite Washington's efforts, his men were so distressed by the disease and the poor conditions of the camps that by the spring, many tried to leave and were charged with desertion and mutiny. During Washington's stay, Loyalists who tried to actively recruit Americans into the British Army were tried and convicted in the courthouse and jail that once stood behind me. 2 men were actually hung on the green on December 2nd, 1777.
So babe, how do you feel about the winters in Morristown?
It's so cold right now. No wonder Washington's men mutinied. Oh my God. So right behind us is Washington Headquarters Museum, which was constructed in 1937. So this was actually one of the first museums ever constructed for the National Park Service. In addition, the architect also used Mount Vernon, which is Washington's actual residency, as inspiration for this building. Right behind us is Ford Mansion. So Ford Mansion is where Washington stayed during his time in Morristown. Whew. I give Washington's men props for marching in this bitter cold when they mutinied, because they marched all the way from Morristown, which is where we are right now, all the way down to Princeton in this cold weather. So this lovely building was owned by Jacob Ford Jr. So this is the Ford Mansion. So the Ford Mansion served as Washington's headquarters and his residency while he was in Morristown. So while Washington was living in this lovely, warm, cozy house, his men were quartered 3 miles down the road living in huts.
What's up?
So this place might be actually haunted because this is where Jacob Ford Jr. actually died while Washington was living here. So there might be a ghost in there. Also, this is where Marquis de Lafayette visited Washington while he was here.
Call Zach.
It's so cold.
So babe,
Yeah?
where are we going to?
We are going to see a reconstructed hut of one that a Continental soldier would have stayed in while he was living in Morristown, or in Jockey Hollow, I should say.
How do you feel about the terrain for the soldiers?
I didn't know this turned into a hiking trip.
By the way, I think it's a good time to say how far away we were from Washington.
Oh yeah. How long did that car ride take?
15 minutes.
Oh my God. That's a long time. While many people might know about the winter at Valley Forge, many people might not know about the winter of 1779 and 1780, when Washington and his men endured freezing cold temperatures in Morristown, New Jersey. Now, by all historical accounts, this actually was way worse than Valley Forge. During this winter, Washington and his men marched into Morristown in December, and they settled in a region called Jockey Hollow, where we are today. Washington ordered men to build huts like this right behind me, and that's where they lived for about 6 months and endured very freezing cold temperatures like right now. During that winter, Morristown actually experienced 28 snowfalls during that year. Morristown actually experienced a blizzard that lasted for 2 days, which actually resulted in 4 feet of snow in its wake. So not only was there a lot of snow, but it was very, very cold. This winter actually proved to be one of the coldest on record. And Washington even chronicled this intense cold that him and his men were exposed to, describing this winter as intensely cold and freezing. Now, this winter of 1779 to 1780 was actually also known as the hard winter because of how cold it was. While in Jockey Hollow, about 10,000 to 12,000 men were stationed here. Now, they were ordered to build huts like this, and about 12 men were ordered to live in these huts. And if you can tell, it is very small in here. So imagine 10,000 to 12,000 men trying to live in these huts all around this area. After this winter, about only 8,000 men were left because of desertion and deaths. So not only did the Continental Army deal with extreme cold, they also dealt with shortages of food and supplies. So behind me is Wick's farm, which is where the men actually built some of those log houses that you saw before, and where they also tried to find food during this cold winter. Washington noted that the soldiers sometimes went 5 or 6 days together without bread, at other times as many days without meat, and once or twice 2 or 3 days without either. So according to some sources, soldiers were so desperate for food that they ate tree bark, leather from old shoes, or even dogs. So in a circular letters to the states written on December 16, 1779, Washington recounted that the situation of the Army with respect to supplies is beyond description alarming. It has been 5 or 6 weeks past on half allowance, and we have not 3 days' bread or a third allowance on hand, nor anywhere within reach. According to Washington, the Army had never experienced a like extremity at any period of the war, signifying his distress over the conditions his troops faced. So during the same winter, Benedict Arnold was actually court-martialed here in Morristown on December 23, 1779. He was actually tried for abusing his power as an Army officer for financial gain. But on a sweeter note, during this winter, Alexander Hamilton, who was Washington's aide-de-camp at the time, was actually stationed here. And while he was stationed here, he actually met and courted his future wife, Elizabeth Schuyler.
Hey, babe.
Yes?
What was the whole about?
If you watched Hamilton, you would know.
Oh.
Despite the winter conditions of the winter of 1779 to 1780, Washington and his men returned to Jockey Hollow the following year. So during the winter of 1780 to 1781, Washington decided to learn from his past mistakes and split the Continental Army into smaller components to ease the strain of supply. Now, one of the components was the Pennsylvania line, and they weren't too happy about the conditions that they were facing at Jockey Hollow. They demanded higher pay and better living conditions. They also felt that their 3-year enlistment had expired, but their officers didn't think so. The officers said that they had to fight until the end of the war. So they weren't too happy with everything that was going on. So on January 1st, 1781, the Pennsylvania line launched a mutiny. Now, this mutiny led to them abandoning the Jockey Hollow encampment. So the men of the Pennsylvania line marched all the way down to Princeton, New Jersey, where they set up temporary headquarters. Now, at this headquarters, they actually held negotiations with the Supreme Executive Council of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Now, these negotiations were quick and successful. So the men who thought that their enlistment had expired, they were able to leave. But however, some of these men actually re-enlisted into the Continental Army and fought in future campaigns. Now, because this mutiny was so successful, it had inspired other mutinies such as the Pompton Mutiny. Now, that one wasn't so successful. So the Pompton Mutiny involved the New Jersey line of the Continental Army. Now, they weren't happy with their conditions either, so on January 20th, 1781, they also launched their own mutiny at the Pompton Camp. Now, the Pompton Camp is in modern-day Bloomingdale, New Jersey, but that's up for debate. Pompton Lakes, New Jersey, and also Riverdale, New Jersey also say that the Pompton Mutiny happened there, but who knows? So what ended up happening, though, is that the New Jersey line tried to march their way to Trenton, New Jersey. However, they didn't get too far because Washington was actually alerted to this mutiny. George Washington immediately ordered detachment from West Point under the command of General Howe, who surrendered the mutineers by surprise in their quarters, reduced them to unconditional submission, and executed 2 of their instigators on the spot. This has totally quelled the spirit of mutiny, and everything is now quiet. So the result of the mutiny was that the 2 leaders of this mutiny were executed by firing squad. Now, the firing squad was made up of 12 mutineers. Now, the 12 mutineers were so distraught by this execution that they ended up leaving the Continental Army. However, New Jersey didn't really hold too much grudges because they ended up encamping at Jockey Hollow during the winter of 1781 to 1782.